It is a joy to be with you this evening here at All Saints Parish. When I first found out I was becoming your bishop, I of course went on the website to see what was going on in the diocese, and I saw the information about this capital campaign and really had to admire the wisdom, courage, and foresight to enter into an effort like this, because it's not an easy thing. But to do it is so important to be able to provide, just not just for current needs of parishes and the diocese, but also for the future needs to provide for those who will come after us. Though I did think about my first impression visiting parish would be asking for money. But if it wasn't for such a good reason, I'd probably be more hesitant. But just seeing already what's already being done in the parishes through this campaign, I'm glad to be able to be part of this fourth wave, to visit these last parishes, to share about our efforts. As a pastor, no one ever wants to do a capital campaign. In all of my parishes where I served, we did a capital campaign. And most of the time I was just there for the part of raising money. I never saw the actual finished product. It's one thing I'm looking forward to being here in the diocese for 21 years so I can see the fruits of our efforts as this campaign progresses. But in my parish where I was pastor, a couple of years into it, we realized that we simply had run out of space for our work with the community, our outreach. We had no space for that for our youth ministry, for our catechetics. And so we needed more space, and we needed a parish center. And so the parish council and the finance committee said, yeah, we need to move forward on this, because we realized our operating budget, our offertory budget, from weekly collections, we couldn't raise that type of money, that major project. We had to do a special capital campaign and ask people to kind of go above and beyond that offertory to make that sacrificial gift to be able to help us achieve this goal, to provide for the future of our parish. And so it was very successful. And we now have a beautiful parish center. Some wonderful ministries are going on there. And it's a joy for me to see the fruit of that. And I think here in the diocese too, we realize that there are some projects, some needs parishes have, as well as our diocese, just can't be already fulfilled by the weekly offertory collection on Sunday, nor by the annual CPC collection for the diocese. We need that extra campaign to be able to achieve some very important goals. And so again, it's good for me to be with you this evening to hear about these goals, to hear about this project, this campaign, and ask you to prayerfully and thoughtfully consider your part in it. And so just invite you to have an open mind and open ears as we speak about it, and to ultimately become asking the Lord for that guidance to see if there's something you can be part of and something you can help contribute to the present as well as the future of this parish and for the diocese. So to speak more about the capital campaign itself and its kind of its genesis, I would ask Tim McGuire, who's our diocesan chancellor and chief operating officer, to share some thoughts.
I don't know if I'm worthy to stand up here, but Father says that you can see me better, so I will move up here. Well, so after I get over being uncomfortable standing up here, I'm used to being down there walking in the aisle. But thank you. As Bishop Siegel said, my name is Tim McGuire, and I'm blessed to serve as the Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer for the diocese. And first of all, thank you for coming tonight. We know you could be a lot of other places tonight, so thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. We really appreciate it. We also thank Father Jay and the staff for your wonderful hospitality as well. So thank you for being here. As Bishop Siegel said, I'm just going to briefly talk about the background behind this capital campaign. In fact, when Bishop Gettelfinger was still bishop, he considered doing a capital campaign. We're one of the very few dioceses in the country that have not conducted a capital campaign at the diocesan level. So he was considering, should we do one? And he talked to some folks and decided it wasn't the right time to proceed with the capital campaign. Then when Bishop Thompson arrived, he said the same thing that you heard Bishop Siegel say when he arrived, and that is, when you first arrive as a bishop, people say, what's your vision? Well, both of them said, we want to just take our time. We want to get to know people. We want to understand the needs of the parishes, the needs of the diocese. What do we need to do? So Bishop Thompson at that time just took his time and kind of listened. And after a while, parishes started coming to him saying, Bishop, we need to do this or we need to do that. So Bishop Thompson went to his advisory groups and said, do you think it's time for us to do a diocesan capital campaign? So after listening to his advisory groups, the decision was made that let's conduct a feasibility study. And if you're familiar with capital campaigns, a feasibility study is done ahead of the campaign to say, are the things that we're considering, do they make sense? Do they resonate with people? How much money can we raise? Is it the right time? Just consider a variety of factors. So he made the decision after listening to everyone that yes, let's proceed with that. And after some due diligence, we hired the Steyer Group from Omaha, Nebraska, and Diane Keller's here tonight representing the Steyer Group, and she'll talk more about the campaign later. But the Steyer Group conducted it in the fall of 2015, a feasibility study, and they came back in January of 2016 and said, yes, we think it's the right time to do a capital campaign in your diocese. In fact, we think you can raise somewhere between $24 and $30 million in a campaign. In fact, we think the number is probably 29 million, and the reason they said that was if you take the sum of all the Sunday collections in our diocese and add them up for a year, at that time it was 29 million. So we think you can raise one time the offertory throughout the diocese in a capital campaign. So Bishop Thompson took it back to his advisory groups and said, this is what they're recommending, what do you think? Obviously then the decision was made to move forward, and that's why we're here today. But he just didn't say, let's do a campaign and go forward like most campaigns. There's a couple of nuances to this campaign. One of them was that he said he was very familiar with, and the Steyer Group was familiar with, a shared campaign. So it's not just identifying diocesan needs and then going to the parishes and saying, we need to raise money for these diocesan needs. It's a shared campaign where the parish would identify needs that they have, and then the money that's raised would be split between the diocese and the parishes. So in each parish campaign, or in this campaign, every dollar that's raised at the parish, 50 cents stays at the parish, and 50 cents is used for diocesan needs. So it's a shared campaign. So each parish is given a goal, and if you achieve that goal, it's a 50-50 split up to that point. From 100% of the goal to 125% of the goal, 80% of the money stays at the parish. And if you go above 125% of your goal, 100% of the money stays at the parish, and the thought being strong parishes make for a strong diocese, not the other way around. So that's one of the things that we're doing. That's the way this campaign has been conducted. And each parish was given, as I mentioned, a goal, and that goal was based on the Sunday collections for the fiscal year 14-15, and that was consistent across all parishes in the diocese. That was what their goal was. And in this particular case, for All Saints, it's just a little above 700,000. But the thing I would mention, unlike CPC, where when you get your CPC assessment every year as a parish, what's not raised through the campaign has to be paid out of the operation. So in effect, it's a tax, if you will. You have to pay the entire amount. This campaign, the number that I mentioned, the 700,000 in this case, is just a goal or a target. As long as the parish follows the model that Diane will outline later, whatever is raised is raised. So if the parish raises $500,000, $250,000 would stay at the parish, $250,000 would be used for diocesan needs, and we would thank the good Lord for a successful campaign and call it a day and move on. You're not going to get a bill for the difference between whatever you raise and what your goal was. It's simply a target. We ask that you just give it a good faith effort to try to raise the money. So it's different than CPC, which in effect, it's a tax, you have to pay it. This is simply just a goal, something to strive for. So that was one nuance of the campaign. The other thing was, in total, Bishop Thompson said, I hear the Steyer Group, I think we can probably do it, but since we've not done a capital campaign, I'm going to set the goal at $22 million. So our goal was $22 million, $11 million identified for diocesan needs, and $11 million identified for parish needs, and it would be up to each parish to identify what their needs are. Obviously, those have to be run through Diane and ultimately through the diocese for the approval, just to make sure, Father Jay doesn't want to put a swimming pool in the backyard or something like that. So try to make sure that we have reasonable goals, but again, the local parishes know what those are and what they need to do. So the needs were identified at the parish level. So the campaign would be conducted. And it's a 3-year campaign. It'll kick off sometime around in March sometime, and we'd ask for a 3-year pledge period from that time as you move forward. And if you need longer and like to do 4 or 5 years, obviously we'll that would be accommodated. So people then have asked, and Bishop Siegel touched on it briefly in his comments, well, if you're doing this capital campaign, what about CPC? Well, again, as Bishop Siegel suggested, that when a parish does a capital campaign, if you've ever done one before at this parish or other parishes you've been involved with, you know that the parish doesn't stop taking up its normal Sunday collection. Normal Sunday collection keeps the lights on, pays for insurance, those kind of things. And then the capital campaign, as Bishop Siegel said, is for extraordinary needs. And the same situation applies at the diocesan level. CPC is our equivalent of a Sunday collection. It pays the bills, keeps the lights on, pays insurance and things of that nature. And this capital campaign is to address some significant items that couldn't be addressed through CPC, through extraordinary needs, and then also to help the parishes address the extraordinary needs that they have as well. So one of the changes that Bishop Thompson made to the CPC was so that CPC, which is normally conducted in the spring, would also not overlap with the capital campaign. He moved the campaign from the spring, which normally is, to the fall. And there was a transition period over the last couple years so that parishes wouldn't be conducting CPC and the capital campaign at the same time. So in All Saints' case, CPC was conducted, I believe, in the fall, and then the capital campaign will take place in the spring. Now, admittedly, that's not a long time, but at least they're not being conducted on top of one another. If that change hadn't been made, parishes would be conducting the campaign and CPC this spring. And one of the things that Bishop Thompson heard from his pastors and priests as he was considering this was, you know, we've just gone through a parish reorganization, and there's still some issues associated with that, as this parish obviously knows. And what can we do maybe to delay it just slightly so that we don't have to deal with a capital campaign while we're still dealing with all these other issues? So what Bishop Thompson decided to do, instead of having every parish conduct this campaign at the same time like most dioceses do, he broke it into 4 waves to say the first wave, which was in the fall of 2016, would be parishes that came to him and said, you know, Bishop, we really need to put in a parking lot, or we really need to do this, or we really need to do that. The second wave were parishes that were not involved in the parish reorganization, and then waves 3 and 4, which wave 3 was this past fall, and wave 4, the final wave, is this spring, or parishes that were involved in the parish reorganization. For the most part, we had to add a few parishes to balance it out, but hopefully that gave the parishes a little more time to deal with some issues in regard to the parish reorganization before you jumped right into a capital campaign. So those are some of the nuances of the campaign, some of the history behind it. If you have the handout that you received when you walked in that has the pie chart on it, keep thinking I'm going to walk off the edge of this thing. So, just as I mentioned, it's a $22 million campaign, and $11 million for diocesan needs, $11 million for parish needs. The sheet that you have outlines the $11 million for the parish needs, or excuse me, for the diocesan needs. And I'll just briefly run through those with you. We have $3 million, the first category listed there, for the support of seminary education and the support of our priests. We have $2 million will be endowed for seminary education, and $1 million will be endowed to address those 4 things that are listed on there to support our priests. And again, that money will be endowed. Excluding the campaign expenses, the diocese has $10 million identified. 60% of those funds will be endowed so that the benefit will continue to accrue year after year to the diocese. And we're not just taking advantage of this one-time thing. We hope to build on those and be able to support some of the things that we're talking about. So that first $3 million for the support of our seminarian education and priest is where the money would be endowed. Then we have $3 million, the next category, for Catholic education, and that's not just for our schools, it's for all types of faith formation, for youth and young adult, and for our religious education, adult formation programs. But admittedly, the biggest part is for our schools and for tuition assistance, and that's $1.5 million out of that $3 million. And the group that we're looking to target to try to assist with tuition assistance is, as you know, in Indiana, we have one of the most, if not the most successful voucher program in the country, and that helps many, many families. And then we also are blessed with a group of folks that have the resources to be able to pay full tuition. The group we're trying to help with this particular endeavor is the group that's just above the cutoff for the vouchers, that they don't qualify for a voucher, but they don't make enough to be able to pay for tuition completely. So it's a starting point. We hope to be able to help that group. Then we've identified a $500,000 endowment for teacher development and education for our parents, so they understand the resources available to them to be able to assist them to pay for a Catholic education. And we have a $500,000 for youth and young adult, and then a $500,000 endowment for religious education, adult formation. So that's the $3 million in that second category. The third category is social justice. Pope Francis calls us to go to the margins, so we feel like that was an important part of our campaign. And again, that's $3 million that we've identified for social justice, social outreach, and $800,000 of that will be endowed for programs that the Catholic Charities would like to implement that they haven't done, or would expand programs that they have today that we don't have the resources. And then the biggest part of the money that's not endowed would be $2.2 million for Catholic Charities to have a permanent home. Today, they've paid rent. In fact, since their founding in our diocese, they've paid rent. We'd like to have a permanent home. But in addition to being a permanent home for Catholic Charities, it would also house a social enterprise. It's a business. You may be familiar with a social enterprise. Nonprofits, not just Catholic nonprofit, but any nonprofit can start a business, whether it's making candles, whatever it might be. And the point of the business is to make a profit, just like any other business, but instead of the money and the profit going to owners or shareholders, the money goes back into the business to help self-sustain the business, and then the business can pay for itself over the years. You might say, well, where's the social outreach aspect of that? And that comes from the fact that the employees of this business would be people that would struggle to find a job somewhere else. Maybe they've just been released from prison or have other issues in their life that keeps them from being gainfully employed. So the hope of this business is to help those folks. It would be short-term employment, 6 months, and allow them to build a resume. We'd also help them with some of their other life skills that maybe keep them from maintaining a job full-time. But it's not intended to be long-term employment. It's simply intended to be short-term employment so that they can take that and go get a job at Toyota or wherever it might be. And one of the things that Sharon Burns, the director of Catholic Charities, as she's talked to business leaders around the community throughout the diocese, they're really excited about this program and what we hope it will do for our community. And one of the things that Sharon's heard from the business leaders is, Sharon, we don't really care about teaching them how to make widgets. We can teach them to make whatever widgets we're making. What we need help in, can you teach them how to show up on time, how to dress appropriately, how to respond to constructive criticism, how to get along with their peers? It's very important the employers are seeing this, and that's part of what we're focusing on and hope to expand. And our goal, long-term goal, is to expand this beyond Evansville, so we can do something similar perhaps in Jasper, Vincennes, or Washington and other parts of the diocese. But obviously the most resources are here in Evansville, so that's why we're starting here. So that's another $3 million. And then we have $1 million in the fourth category for the actual capital part of the project, the building part. We have a $500,000 been identified for St. Benedict Cathedral. And the reason for that was in 1999, Bishop Gettelfinger designated St. Ben's as the cathedral of the diocese, and as such it became the bishop's church. So if the bishop wanted to have Mass, that's his church. For ordination, for chrism Mass, it's his church. From 99 till about 2012, the diocesan events that occurred there, the parish was not reimbursed for those. The parish carried the full burden of paying for those things. So out of a sense of obligation to repay them for what they've done through the years, and in addition, they participated in this program like every other parish, but they've also raised an additional $3.5 million for the renovation of the interior of the cathedral. So over the next few years, as you go to liturgies at the cathedral, you'll see the different things that are taking place at the cathedral, and we feel it's an obligation, because it is the bishop's church, to contribute to that program. So we have a $500,000 for that, and for also what they've done over the last 20 years as the cathedral, 20 close years. And then we have a $500,000 for windows at the Catholic Center. The Catholic Center on Kentucky Avenue was built in 1963. The windows in that building are the original windows, and the hot and cold air is always going the wrong way. So we hope the windows will pay for themselves in a relatively short period of time. So that's $1 million. And then finally, of our $11 million, we have $1 million for the campaign expenses, for postage, for printing, for paper, for DVDs, and also to pay for the Steyer Group. And the Steyer Group's part of that is the biggest part of it. And people have said, well, man, that's a lot of money to pay to somebody to coordinate this campaign. Couldn't we just do this on our own? We've got a lot of good people, smart, generous people in our diocese, and I don't disagree with that. But one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure that we had a consistent experience across all of our 45 parishes, that every parish had the opportunity to address their needs and address the diocesan needs in the same way. And we felt like we needed a group to do that. And the Steyer Group has done that. They've been wonderful, and particularly Diane has been great about helping us stay on point, helping us stay on track. In fact, having been involved in this from day one, I go to my grave saying there's no way we would be where we are today without the Steyer Group. It's been a great return on our investment. You may have noticed in the message before Christmas, we have a $22 million campaign, as I mentioned. Through the first 3 waves, we've already raised $27 million. So it's been hugely successful. The model's worked. That's why we ask that the parish just follow the model and give it your best effort. Whatever you raise, you raise. But we've found that it's been a great investment. So that gives you some brief background on the diocesan needs. When you get your mailing in March, there'll be a pamphlet that will have many more details about this, but just touch on the high-level things. One last thing before I turn it over to Diane. People have said, well, what have you learned from waves 1, 2, and 3? And the thing that we've learned is that we try to educate people on probably one of the more important aspects of the campaign, and that is when you get this package in March, included with the package will be the material that talks more about all of these things that I just touched on, but there'll also be a letter. It's a letter from Bishop Siegel asking you to prayerfully consider a gift amount to this campaign. And it's not going to be the same amount. Every person's not going to be asked, or every family's not going to be asked for the same amount. Some people could give more than that. Some people, it would be a struggle to give that amount. So the Steyer Group, like many other groups, has developed a program that allows these letters to be tailored so that each family will be asked for a specific amount based on some history, and Diane will talk more about these. But the key is to prayerfully consider this gift. It's between you and God. The only people that are going to know what you're asked for or what you give are a few people at the Catholic Center in the financial department that have to manage this and keep track of it. Other than that, the only people that are going to know are you and God. Bishop Siegel's not looking through the pledges every day. Father Jay's not looking through the pledges every day thinking, well, what did this family give or what did that family give? This is strictly between you and God to prayerfully consider what is the right gift for this capital campaign. So we'd ask that you just consider that with an open heart and open mind as you receive that letter in March. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Diane Keller from the Steyer Group, and she'll talk more about the details of the campaign.
Thank you, Tim. There isn't a lot that shuts me up, but being up here really does. I'm not used to it. I don't know how you guys do it every week. My name is Diane Keller, and I am with the Steyer Group. And our firm has conducted well over 1,000 capital campaign efforts across the nation for Catholic parishes, for diocesan efforts, as well as for archdiocesan efforts and general nonprofits, whether they be hospitals, nursing homes, libraries, and colleges. All those different gifts that go to all of those nonprofits and all of those projects and efforts, certain patterns will surface. And so we bring to each effort the best of what we've learned from efforts that we've conducted. So in the 20-year history, having conducted over 1,000, I will share with you that I was in church work for 16 years prior to joining the Steyer Group and have been with them for the last 13 years, going across the nation on behalf of the Catholic Church and raising funds. I'm pretty much shameless in raising funds on behalf of the Catholic Church. And let me start with, if we were all just the best little Bible readers and did what God told us to do, which is God calls us to 10%, and we nationally, across the United States, Catholics are known to give 1 to 1.5% of their earned income back in charitable giving. This is certainly not an exercise or an effort to go from 0 to 10% in the next 6, 8 weeks, maybe 12. Not at all. What Tim mentioned is what you'll hear referenced frequently tonight, which is it's between you and God. But there is a challenge that I put out there to all of the parishes. You are parish number 45 in the long list for the Diocese of Evansville, and I have shared this with each and every parish. And that is, go home and do the math. You have homework. In the privacy of your homes, go figure out, and it's a good time because it's tax time, so go figure out what did we earn, or what was our income in 2017, what did we give back to our parish and in charitable giving, and what might we consider moving forward? What could we do? That's so weird to see. I don't do television very often. Well, hello. So let me share with you some of the ingredients. I'll reference those points again, but let me share with you 5 ingredients, or the recipe, if you will, on running a successful capital campaign effort. Because you can run a capital campaign effort, it doesn't mean it's going to be successful, but following this model, which parallels the bishop's pastoral on stewardship, which came out in the 90s, which speaks to how to raise funds in the Catholic Church, how to do fundraising. And one of the first things right off the top is having real needs. Clearly, as a parish, you have needs not only on this campus, but also your additional campus. And so those needs cannot be met through the regular offertory collection. So we're looking at extraordinary gifts separate over and above whatever may go to offertory. The same is true of diocesan needs. In fact, I would have to say that until we have all of our parishes, all of our facilities, all of our programming endowed, there is always the opportunity for a capital campaign. Had we done 20 years ago what we are doing now with endowments, our schools and our parishes would not be the struggling entities that they are. They'd be in a much more solid foundation. But again, this is seed money. This is a beginning. And an example of that, we hope to raise $2 million on behalf of seminary and education. We want good men in the pipeline. We need good men in the pipeline. And so this $2 million will be endowed funds to help provide seminary and education, which costs anywhere from $45,000 to $55,000 per year per seminarian. It's a big chunk of change. To fully endow seminary and education would take $6 million. We're not going to do that in one fell swoop. So you can see that this is seed money. Bishop Thompson had spoken of all of these as seed endowments. We had to start somewhere, and so the journey begins now. Having a realistic target or goal. The target for the parish is taken from the fiscal offertory of 2014-15, spread out over a 3-year period. So having a realistic target, and again, it is a target. As long as we run the model, do the best that we can, at the end of the day, that's all that there is. There is no tax, if you will, as Tim referenced. Having committed leadership. The pastors, the priests, now Archbishop and our Bishop Siegel, they didn't go to seminary for how to be the best fundraiser. Doesn't work that way, not at the top of their bucket list. It is, however, at the top of mine, may not be at the top of yours. I fully understand that. But having committed priests in this effort has totally impacted in a very positive way. Having the parish staffs who all had jobs before I ever showed up at all of their offices, they've been wonderfully supportive and worked collaboratively with me in order to have it be the best campaign at their parish, as well as the volunteers. Father cannot go to everyone's house. Bishop cannot go to everyone's house in the diocese. And so truly, without all of you who are the new volunteer cadre, thank you so very much for being here. No chuckles. Okay, that's better. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know you're there. But it's the volunteers who have stepped forward to get behind something greater than themselves on that which they believe is near and dear to them, which is their parish. All parishes have needs. And so all together, people become more informed. We as Catholics become more responsible for our parishes, for our dioceses, and their initiatives, and the needs that our parishes have. You'll hear a lot about fundraising and money, money, money. And truly, that is a byproduct of fundraising. I won't lie about it. That's what I was hired to do, come here and raise funds. But at the end of the day, this is first and foremost a community building opportunity. Parishioners who have volunteered have gone out and visited with fellow parishioners. And a number of the parishes have made it easily accessible to meet before and after Masses, so nobody has to clean their house, make coffee, and bake cookies unless they want to. And so having it as accessible to the volunteers and the parishioners to meet, have their questions answered, and be able to make their gift confidentially. None of the volunteers will know what people are asked to give. None of the volunteers will know what people choose to give. So it's, again, between you and God and those in the accounting departments. So having the committed leadership and a communication plan. You will hear tonight answers to questions and topics, all of which you may not be thrilled about. I'm not saying you're going to like all the answers you're going to get, but you will get accurate information. And for those who could not be here tonight, I implore you to share with other fellow parishioners when they circulate something that doesn't sound quite right, like what you heard at tonight's meeting. Then speak up, I encourage you, and say, no, this is how I heard it and I understood it. Because truly, let me share with you, the rumors are rampant. One of the first meetings in Wave 1, Bishop Thompson was taking Q&A, and somebody said, I understand you're building a new cathedral on the north side of town. And Bishop was like, well, you think they would have told me? I am the bishop. And so truly that was a rumor that had been circulated and could not have been any further from the truth. So you heard it here. There is no cathedral on the north side, should that still be circulating out there. But having accurate information. Bulletin and pulpit pieces will have been provided to parishes so that they can, on a weekly basis, as the campaign unfolds in March, April, and May, inform parishioners on a regular basis and answer questions that may come up at the parish level as well. The message has been so good at carrying over, going on 2 years, carrying this campaign effort so that all across the diocese, even though you may not have been active in a wave, you could know what was going on. And so I encourage you to become more informed in regards to that. The website will provide you not only the campaign video, but it will also provide you the entire campaign brochure from which that sheet comes out of. The brochure itself will break down in detail all of the initiatives that are on the sheet that Tim went over with you. And I think it's so important that we choose to be educated and informed, because when you have accurate information, you can choose to make whatever gift well represents you in the effort. And finally, the campaign packet. The campaign packet is a key ingredient to that communication plan. You'll have each registered household of a parish, whether they are regular contributing members or not to the offertory, will be mailed a campaign packet. It will have the brochure that I've mentioned that breaks out all the initiatives at the diocesan level. It will have a specific sheet, a parish insert, that will talk about how the funds that are returned to the parish, how they will be spent at the parish of All Saints, so that each and every household can know, well, where are our dollars going to go and how does it benefit our parish? very important. And finally, that fifth recipe ingredient is the specific request amount. I mentioned how we as Catholics are not well known for being full tithers. I can share with you, if we all did what we're called to do, which is the full 10%, we wouldn't be doing a capital campaign, and parishes would not have wish lists because their ministry life would be exploding beyond what their operations budgets currently struggle to provide for, whether it be salaries, whether it be keeping the lights on or the heat and all those things. But again, this is a journey. We are all stewards, and we're all at different points in the journey. This effort, Bishop Thompson had wanted it to be consistent, as Tim had referenced, and so I will train all the parish volunteers throughout the diocese in this wave, and everyone goes out with the same messaging so that you don't have to worry about somebody coming to visit. Oh, come on, you can do better than that, because they won't know unless you tell them what you're choosing to give. As well, it's not a matter of, well, we gave 50,000, you can do that. Come on, why not? It's not like that. This is a request that you prayerfully consider the amount that is in the letter. Is it the right amount for your household? I stand before you in the sanctuary, so no lies. I have absolutely no idea what the right amount is to ask any of you. I don't know if you have great medical expense. I don't know if you're on a fixed income, if you have several college students, just lost a job, just had a medical issue come up in the family. I have no way of knowing. What I do know is that Catholics give 1 to 1.5% back in charitable giving to their parishes. So when I look at the most recent CPC gift in a parish, 3 years of offertory, if you participated in the planning study back in 2016 and may have provided an amount that you would consider at that time, as well as an executive review, a pastor review, and I put it up to what I call the Steyer Group Grid. And what that grid does is it takes into account what I mentioned about those patterns that surface. If you have someone who gives $500 annually in offertory, they may be asked to consider $1,800 over the 3-year life of the campaign. So $50 a month for 36 months. If you have someone who possibly gives $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, $10,000 in offertory, they may be asked to consider $25,000, $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 over the 3-year life of this campaign. Is that the right amount for each of them? I don't know if anyone is tithing. We don't walk around with T's. It's not a T in the parish PDS system, in the computer system, that says they're tithing. So I'm working off of the national average of the 1 to 1.5%. So to give some examples for how offertory may or may not be accurate, for an accurate instrument, if you will, for people in this campaign. In the first wave, the pastor called me up and said, Diane, I have someone who wants to make their gift. We haven't even started the campaign yet. What do I do? I said, well, Father, let me look up and see what they're going to be asked to give. I said, their offertory represents less than $500 annually. So they're going to be asked to give $1,800 over the 3-year life of the campaign. Long story short is, household walks in and presents Father with a check for $25,000. And I said, Father, did you ask them if they could do that each year for 3 years for a total consideration of $75,000? And he said, no, Diane, I didn't ask that. And then another opportunity was, it was $100 a month for 36 months. The household was going to be asked to consider $3,600 over the 3-year life of the campaign. They too walked in with a check and presented to their pastor a $25,000 check. And the last example I'll share with you, they were going to be asked to consider $9,000 over the 3-year life of the campaign, and they presented a check to the pastor ahead of time of $10,000. In each of those cases, I would have totally missed the mark on what that household may have been capable of giving. To be able to write checks in lump sums like that versus offertory that does not clearly well represent what the capability is. So I would encourage all of you, when the big white packet comes in the mail in March, if you're a registered parishioner, and it's 9 by 12 or 9 by 13, and it has Stewards of God's Grace in the corner, and it's white, open it up. Be sitting down, because you will probably clutch your heart when you see the number that you're being asked to consider. Some people have found it offensive, and I say, don't be offended. I said, clearly you're generous to the parish, but if everybody gives 1 to 1.5%, I don't know that you're tithing or what percentage it is that you're doing. And so clearly, I hope you will share with fellow parishioners that this is an individual, household by household experience. What works for you? Would you prayerfully step out in faith and possibly give 1-2 percentages of what your earned income is each year towards this effort? The Bishop's Pastoral on Stewardship breaks out tithing, and it says 5% goes to your parish, 1% goes to annual appeal, and 4% to other charitable giving. That's something to strive for. And I am not one to pick up a pebble to be able to toss it. We were not always a tithing household. In fact, while we always committed to the 5% for our parish, that other 5% seemed to be a cavernous leap to get across to it. We had 2 small children, 2 daughters, who seemed to be the best little nonprofits in town, and they ate up most of everything else and then some, which is, I'm sure, true of many families. But they're grown and they've gone, and we reevaluated and we took that leap of the 10%. And so I share with you that the Archdiocese of Denver, where I'm from, conducted a seminary and appeal for $35 million on behalf of the 2 seminaries in the Archdiocese of Denver. Everything went to that effort. None of it went to the parishes. So imagine the packet of information comes to our house. It was not our firm. It was another firm that conducted the effort. And in the packet was all the information and the famous letter of ask. And so I looked at the letter, and it had a ridiculous 5-digit request. And I laughed about it and found it quite humorous, and my husband was not amused at all. In fact, he went towards the offended side. And I said, no, no, no. And I had to explain to him everything I explained to you. Catholics give 1 to 1.5%. And I said, at the end of the day, sweetheart, all we have to do is prayerfully consider what well represents our gift in support of our seminarians in this effort. So we sat down, paper and pencil, figured out what is our gift. And we felt good about it. And that's the gift that we gave. And that is all each and every household is asked to do in this effort. You do the math, you figure it out. It's between you and God. And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it over to Tim McGuire to, oh, wait a minute before I turn it over. Forgot one aspect of it. So how exactly do we do the fundraising? It's called face-to-face visits. Besides specific ask amounts, the other element under that is face-to-face visits. And why do we do that? Well, you can always write a letter and ask somebody to give money, and you may get anywhere, I don't know, $1, $500, whatever the case may be. But when people have the opportunity to ask questions with informed volunteers and discuss what their concerns are and get accurate answers to their questions and have that specific ask amount, then people can make an informed decision for what works for them. And so that circles back around to the volunteers are key to this effort. And the volunteers make it happen because they will carry they'll be trained, they'll call up the people they're assigned to in their parish, they'll set a time to get together, take 10 or 15 minutes, do you have any questions, discuss why they themselves are choosing to assist the pastor and bishop in regards to this effort, and then they will present the pledge card in a sealed envelope. And then the parishioner has the opportunity to open up the envelope, which will have the request amount again. Not only was it in the letter, but it'll also be on the pledge card to remind them in case they didn't read the letter. It will tell them again what the amount is, and then they can fill that out, put it in another envelope that they will seal, and the volunteer is the glorified courier that gets it back to the parish office in the smallest amount of time possible. And that is how we have this small window of opportunity. You don't want to be doing this over 4th of July, I'm sure. Barely will want to be doing it by Memorial Day. It could be in your rearview mirror, and the parish will be in a much better place where it's fundraising and it's friend-raising and it's fellowship has occurred at a much greater degree in a very short amount of time. And now I will turn it over to Tim McGuire for the questions. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you, Diane. And I'll probably I'll walk down to field your questions and repeat them so everyone can hear your question. And thanks, as Father Jay mentioned when we started, I want to thank again Bishop Siegel for being here with us tonight. I think today is day 47 as our official leader, and he's already been to 11 of these. In fact, he wasn't even here 3 weeks, and he'd already been to 2 of these. So thank you, Bishop Siegel, again for being here. So between us, we'll do our best to answer your questions. We did that well? No questions? Well, I guess we'll go. Well, while you're thinking of your next question, Diane, remind me to mention that when you receive your letter and whether you get the pledge card in the mail or if someone brings it to you in a visit, you'll have the ability to designate where your gift, if you look at these and say something calls to me a little more than the other 4 or 5 items, or 3 or 4 items that are on there, you can have the ability to designate and say, I want the diocesan portion to go to this, or I want it to go to these 2 things and not all of them, but that's completely up to you. And most people have done that, have not done that. I mean, I think, in fact, less than 1% of the pledges have taken that opportunity, but that you do have that opportunity should you want to do that. Thank you, Diane. Yes, yes, ma'am. The question was, we mentioned a website, and is that the diocesan website or the parish website? I can't speak for the parish, but I know it's on the diocesan website, evdio.org. If you just go to evdio.org, it's on the front page, and you can find the video and the capital campaign brochures available online. Yes, ma'am. The question was, if you receive a letter or packet, are you supposed to mail your pledge back in, or are you supposed to wait till someone comes to see you? One of the things Diane referred to volunteers, it can take me just a minute to answer your question, but I hope I'll answer it, is that when Diane gets all the volunteers from Father to say these are the people that are actually going to go visit folks, there's 10 visits for each volunteer. So what Diane will do, if there were 20 volunteers at this parish, for example, that means that 200 families could be visited. So Diane will start at the top and work her way down and say these 200 families are going to be visited, and then everyone else will get a letter with a pledge card in it. If you're one of the families that will be visited, we just ask that you wait until you set up that visit, whether it's after Mass or at your house, wherever it might be, and they'll give you your pledge card. They won't know what's on it, but they will give it to you and ask you to fill that out, seal it up. Again, they won't see it, and then bring it back. If you're one of the families that are not visited, you'll receive a pledge card and return envelope in your packet and ask that you just mail that back in, and that will go directly to the Catholic Center. Did I cover that right, Diane? Did that answer your question? Yes, ma'am. question was, because of this capital campaign, has there been any impact on St. Meinrad or the sisters at Ferdinand? And maybe just a quick bit of background. And, when I first started this job, I didn't know this either. But while the diocese is a separate entity, and those entities, St. Meinrad's actually part of the Diocese of Indianapolis, the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, we're not privy to all the details of those. Those are separate entities and separate organizations. So I can't speak for what effect our campaign may have had on theirs, because we just don't share that type of information with each other. But I know the sisters are conducting a campaign, or have been conducting a campaign. Is that right, Sister T? And I know St. Meinrad seems like they're always in the fundraising mode. So I can't speak for what that impact it's had. The only thing I would say, though, is Bishop Thompson used to say this all the time, is that the diocese is a small diocese, and there's only so many people, so we're all three groups are probably touching some of the same people to donate to this. So I'm sure there's some impact somewhere. Sorry, I couldn't give you a more specific answer. Some people, Father Jay's point was that some pastors have said collections have gone down, and how do you help with that? The one thing that we've asked, and we've actually seen some situations, while in fact what Father Jay asked is true, there's also the flip side of that is true, where some parishes have actually seen their collections go up after this type of campaign. One of the things that Diane talks about during the training, I think Diane's the right time, is that we ask that this not fracture the giving from your parish, from your stewardship, what you do every Sunday or what you do for CPC. This is extraordinary, above and beyond those things, and we ask that you just prayerfully consider, what you can do and what you can't do for this campaign. But we ask that you not, rob Peter to pay Paul for this. We ask that you continue to support your Sunday collection and also support CPC. But, if you can prayerfully consider what you might do for this extraordinary opportunity, we ask that you just consider that at this time. Yes, ma'am. You can add something to that, Diane.
I have had occasion where some people have come up to me after meetings and said, we're a fully tithing household. What do I do? I said, well, for starters, thank you. Clutch your heart. I'm sure your letter will be asking for too much. But the bottom line is, and what I tell the volunteers when I train them is, if you meet someone and you're meeting with a household and they say to you that they are a fully tithing household, then you thank them. They give their gift every single week. They are not asked to give a gift in addition. If they choose to, great. If they would pray for the success of this campaign, that would be a priceless gift. And that's very important. Tithers do it every week, and we can only hope that that group grows. So thank you.
Betty. The question was, what years, when we're developing an individual ask amount in the letter, what years do we look back at to analyze that? It's the last 3 years of giving. So it's the last 3 years of giving plus the most recent CPC gift. Those are that all then is used to go into Diane. The Steyer Group's developed a grid, so that information is used along with the grid to come up with the individual ask amount. No, in fact, we've developed a secret database. We know how much everybody in this room's worth right now. We know exactly how much to ask. No, I'm kidding you. We don't do that. You're recording that, so I'm just kidding. So we didn't do that. But no, it's not. It's simply based on what you give. And Diane, if you want to touch on that just a little bit more. But there's not it's not a percentage of this, that, or the other. It's simply, as Diane would say, she doesn't know Jean and Betty Gillis from the next person. All she knows is this is what this family gave for the last 3 years. How does that apply to this grid? That's what they plug it in, and that's what the amount is. So she doesn't know what anybody's worth or any of that. It's just simply what's been given the last 3 years. Yes? The question was, when you get the packet in March, will it outline what your parish plans to do? Yes, on the inside, when you open it up on the inside sleeve, there will be a separate page that will talk about what your parish leadership, along with Father Jay, has decided that the parish needs will be used for. And I know that that's being developed by parish leadership and be communicated between now and March, and obviously after that as well. So that answer your question? Yes, ma'am. The question is, since this is the fourth wave, is some of the money that was raised early on already going into these endowments? And thank you, it's a great question. What we've done, for example, the first money that we talked about was $2 million for the support for seminary and expenses. There's an endowment that exists today already for seminary and expenses, but what we decided, because we wanted to be as transparent as possible with this, was to establish separate endowments for each of these things that are listed as endowments on there. So we've established a new endowment, for example, for seminary and education expense. And what we do, I'm going to answer a couple questions with your question, so thank you for it. It's a great question, is that people have asked, well, then when do we get our money back from this campaign? And you get it's paid back to the parishes twice a year, in February and in August. So in this case, you'll start in March, so in August you'll get your first repayment of money. But what we've done in February and August is to fund the new endowments that have been established to support those things that are on this sheet. So they've already have money in them. Hopefully that's growing based on, you know, the performance of the financial markets. So that's already started, and we'll continue to put money into those as the money's collected. Does that answer your question? Yes, ma'am. What constitutes a full tithing? I don't want to steal Diane's thunder, but she tells but I'm going to. She always tells the story. She said a priest asked her one time, is it 10% of net or 10% of gross? 10% of gross, right, Diane?
It is as your heart decides. It is as your heart decides. But, comma, the bishops have outlined it as 5% goes to church, to your parish, 1% goes to the annual appeal, and 4% goes to other charitable giving. Now, I've also met people that do a full 10% to their parish, and those parishes may take their annual appeal out of the offertory. So it all depends on where your heart is and what works for you, and the journey that we're on. So that's how it's outlined and suggested. Jesus didn't drill down that far. Although I did have a priest that had said to me, you know, Diane, the Old Testament calls us to 10%. I said, yes, Father, that's what I'm shooting for. And he said, Diane, the the New Testament, Jesus asks for everything. He wants it all. I said, work with me. I'm starting with 10, okay?
Did we answer your question? Did you? Yes, Father Jay. The question is, on the designation, if somebody says, well, I just want it all to go to the parish, we would say, thank you for that. That's a very generous gift. Please make that gift to the parish. That's outside of this campaign. That's not considered a campaign gift. That's a gift to the parish. Anything else? We want to answer your questions, but we don't want to keep you either, though. Well, again, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. We'll stick around for a while if you have any questions that maybe you didn't want to ask in front of the group, and try to answer those. But again, thank you for being here. We certainly appreciate it, and we wish you the very best as you start this capital campaign. Again, thank you for being here tonight and for your hospitality. And now I ask Father Jay to lead us in a closing prayer.
Thank you, Tim. Since I asked you guys to get up here, I'm going to get up here. And can I give a little sermon first? A little homily? I was just thinking, some of you have heard me say this before, but sometimes I reflect on what I have to be grateful for. And I think that's at the root of this whole business. If we really realized that, we would be different people. And around Thanksgiving time especially, I think about what would happen if I were born a caveman or a cave woman. What would life be like? What would life be like if I were born in a different age altogether? What if I were born in the time of Moses? What if I were born in the time of Jesus or somewhere in between, 2000? What if I were born in the year 1000? Life would have been a lot different and a lot tougher, I think. And what if I were born in Africa or in the Mideast or in Syria? We living here in America just feel like we're entitled. We have so much. We're the richest people in the world. Even though we think we're poor because we're comparing ourselves to really, really rich people, we're all very rich. And we just don't appreciate that, I think. We feel so entitled. And I think if we began to realize that more deeply, we would then approach life and our faith entirely differently. And we would be generous with our time and our talent and our treasure. It would just come naturally. So let us pray. Lord God, you have given us so much stuff that we never even think about. We just take for granted. Help us to, tonight, think of something to be thankful for that we've never even thought of before. Help us to be a grateful people who know that everything we have, all good things come from you. And help us be able to react with generosity, to give of our time and our talent, and to give of our treasure to help you change this world of ours to be a place of justice and love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. I'd like to thank Bishop Siegel for coming, and Diane and Tim and anybody else who's here. Thank you all for coming. This is nice.